As visual media becomes more popular, writers often express their opinions, whether intentionally or unintentionally, in the narratives which can influence their audience. This is the case for the game Final Fantasy XIV, which is played by millions of people. The game takes place in a medieval fantasy setting with fictional gods and goddesses, but the game's story has a very atheistic worldview. While Final Fantasy XIV addresses religion, the message is too subtle for most audiences to understand, thus making the argument ineffective. In the game, there are creatures known as primals, which are physical manifestations of gods. They are not gods themselves, but beings which are created by their followers, mimicking a god or goddess. In order for a primal to be summoned, its followers need to have faith in the being, and the more faith they have, the stronger the primal is. Once summoned, its followers can pray to it, which increases the primal's strength. At one point in the game, a primal is summoned based on the mythology of the culture that summoned it. Up until this point, the narrative explained primals as false manifestations of gods that actually existed, but in this scene, the primal was created based on a delusion. At this point in time, the player might begin to wonder if the gods in that game did not actually exist, and that all the characters were worshipping primals. The narrative does not confirm nor deny this, but this is a valid question that the player might have based on the story up until this point. However, in Shadowbringers, the game's latest expansion, the protagonists discover that the most powerful goddess that they worship is really a primal. Furthermore, in the Heavensward expansion, a character named Iselle feels almost religiously devoted to bringing peace to man and dragon. Iselle takes her inspiration from a woman named Shiva, who originally brought peace between the two 1,000 years ago. Iselle believes that Shiva became a goddess after she died, and Iselle is even able to take on Shiva's form because of it. However, later in the expansion, Iselle learns that Shiva never became a goddess, and the form she was taking on was really just a primal, a physical manifestation of Iselle's delusion. Shiva is actually the name of a Hindu goddess, so the game subtly argues against Hinduism, and many of the outfits the corrupt leaders in the game wore are very similar to the uniforms that Catholic priests wore during the Middle Ages. While the game isn't necessarily mocking Christianity or Hinduism, by referencing existing religions, it gives a statement on religion itself. With the way the story deals with primals, the game argues that there is no God and that all religion is man-made. By including the details of the primal strength being determined by how much faith and prayer their followers have, the game is saying that gods seem more real based on how much faith that a particular religion's followers have. And by having the player who controls a mortal protagonist defeat the primals, the game suggests that man is the most supreme species in the universe, and that all religion will be debunked by man. While the game addresses religion and gives a bold statement about it, most people playing the game will not even understand that the argument is being made. The first reason is because the primals are not explained very well. Primals are very confusing, and the game does very little to explain what they are. There are only a few out of thousands of lines of dialogue that explain the primals, which makes the concept confusing enough for most people to overlook it and just pay attention to the main narrative. It was only because I was recording my playthrough of the game that I was able to understand them. If one just plays it once and pays more attention to the main story, missing the explanation of the primals, the player will think that they are just powerful creatures that some characters worship. The second reason most people won't understand the argument against religion is because all of the protagonists are religious themselves. All of the protagonists make references to the god or goddess they follow, and throughout the game they will mention that they will pray for their safety, or that they will pray for their success. Ironically, some of the main villains in the game are also atheistic and want to destroy the primals. If the player missed the argument against religion made by the primals, they would not see the atheistic worldview. After all, it would not make much sense that the game was arguing against religion if the protagonists were all religious. The game also uses several fallacies in its argument, making it even weaker. The most notable fallacy is the appeal to emotion. In one scene, a young rat creature is traumatized when he finds out that his parents were sacrificed in order to strengthen a primal. Then the player is sent to fight this evil being that is terrorizing everyone. Since this is a game and not a movie, interactivity plays into the emotion. Primal fights are usually challenging and fast-paced, requiring the player to work together with other players to slay it. After the fight is over, the player feels a sense of excitement while fighting the primal, and they will feel good that the primal is no longer causing problems for the citizens of Eorzea. By using both gameplay and story to create emotion, the player can get a sense that they have conquered a god, and so is above religion. Another fallacy the game uses is the strawman fallacy. All of the followers of the primals are animal-like people known as beast tribes. By having them be animal people, the game subtly argues that religious people haven't evolved as much as atheists. However, this argument is very, very subtle and will fly out over almost everyone's heads. Final Fantasy XIV is a game played by millions, and with the increase of story-driven games coming out, it was only a matter of time before one addressed religion. Final Fantasy XIV makes subtle but obvious arguments that lean towards atheism. However, the argument is too subtle for most audiences to grasp because of the poor explanation of the primals, and because of the fact that the protagonists are religious. The game also suffers from fallacies by appealing to emotion and using the strawman fallacy. Even though the game makes a bold statement, it is not convincing and most people won't even see the argument.